This is the scene several times a day in northwest suburban Barrington. Dozens of railroad tank cars, each filled with at least 30,000 gallons of volatile crude oil or ethanol, come rolling through the center of the village.
Kind of random mix, if you will, but by all means we see a lot of tank cars.
Steve Morrissey should know. His home and office sit less than 50 feet away from railroad tracks that split Barrington in half. When he moved here 23 years ago, the tracks were barely used.
There was some discussion about pulling up the rail line and creating a bike path.
But that all changed about 7 years ago when Canadian National bought the tracks and began regular shipments of crude oil. Nationally, since 2008, the number of tank cars hauling oil from the Bakken shale fields in North Dakota has jumped from nearly 10,000 per year to more than 400,000.
There's another train, probably maybe 30 minutes after you just arrived.
During our interview with Joan Kellogg, who lives along the same set of tracks in Barrington as Steve Morrissey, we saw at least 2 trains hauling tank cars roll past just outside her back door.
What I've heard people say is you have to have a bag ready to run out the door if you have a chance.
In July 2013, dozens of people living in the small town of Lac-Mégantic, Quebec, did not have a chance when an out-of-control train loaded with crude oil came barreling through the small lakeside community in the middle of the night. 47 people died in the inferno.
Lake is burning, town is burning, flammable oil coming up through the sewer system. It was absolutely a catastrophe of the first order.
Barrington Mayor Karen Darch toured the devastated Canadian town in the months following the disaster. The once bustling downtown section is now a ghost town. She worries that a similar catastrophe could occur in Barrington.
So here's Barrington High School with the 3,000 students, and here's the track. So this is a few blocks, 2.5 blocks away.
The biggest concern is safely evacuating all those students and residents in the event of a derailment, something Barrington Fire Chief Jim Airy thinks about all the time.
And I lay awake at night, not too far from here, listening to the trains going over the tracks and hoping I hear nothing out of the ordinary.
Fire Chief Airy says his department trains for the worst-case scenario. He says what's frustrating is that the railroads don't share what they're hauling with first responders. Instead, they keep a paper list of the cargo in the cab of the locomotive.
We're dealing with trains that are up to 2 miles long now. That could be a 1 7/8 walk to find out where the paperwork is and hope that it's there for us to access.
In June 2009, a train carrying dozens of tank cars loaded with ethanol derailed and erupted in flames near Rockford, Illinois. A woman waiting in her car at a crossing gate died. The National Transportation Safety Board concluded that the tank cars that derailed, known in the industry as DOT 111s, had an inadequate design and could split open during a derailment.
And today, we're still exposed to that tank car running through our city on a constant basis.
Tom Weisner is the mayor of Aurora, Illinois' most densely populated city after Chicago, with 200,000 residents. Tank cars loaded with crude oil often roll through the downtown area. The mayor says the recent derailment of tank cars near Galena hits too close to home. That same shipment of crude oil was destined to pass through Aurora.
This is a country relative to rail safety that is constantly an accident waiting to happen.
A recent report by the Federal Department of Transportation is predicting there could be 10 derailments of crude oil trains per year in the U.S. over the next 2 decades, resulting in $4 billion damage and possibly killing hundreds of people if the accidents happen in densely populated areas like Chicago. Despite recent headlines about fiery derailments, the railway industry says safety is a top priority. In a statement, Canadian National Railway said 99.99% of dangerous goods arrive at their destinations safely. Mayor Weisner says those numbers are meaningless.
And as this traffic continues to grow, no matter what their percentage of safety is, there will be towns destroyed, there will be people killed, and the question is, what is our federal government going to do about it?
The mayors of Aurora and Barrington joined a coalition of suburban communities calling for tougher safety standards for all tank cars. They include full head shields on each end of the cars to protect against punctures, stronger valve housings on top, thicker reinforced tanks, and electronic brakes on each tank car to prevent the type of pancaking that occurred in Quebec, as seen in this animated video from the Transportation Safety Board of Canada. A 3D animation shows the extent of the damage to at least one of those DOT 111 tank cars, nearly flattened and riddled with gaping holes. While railroad trade groups support safety improvements, they insist that electronic brakes will not prevent derailments, and they fret about the costs. $60,000 per car for safety improvements, including $8,000 for new brakes.
When you compare what it costs, if there is an accident, to what it would cost to meet the higher standard, there really isn't a comparison. There's no question that the higher standard has to be met.